She was just a quiet waitress in a small-town diner, until a faded military tattoo exposed a past no one expected. What began with a spilled cup of coffee unraveled a buried war story, a soldier's final stand, and the legacy of a forgotten unit. As word spread, her booth became sacred ground, where grief, healing, and purpose found a voice. Welcome to my channel. You ever watch someone pour coffee and somehow know they've seen more war than peace? That's how I felt the first time I saw her, Addie, short for Addison Reed. She worked the early shift at Charlie's Diner, this old roadside cafe tucked between two ridges on the outskirts of Cedar Hollow, Oregon. A nothing town if you're just passing through. But if you stay a while, you learn it holds memories like the bark of an old tree, quiet, rough, and deep. Most mornings, I'd sit at the corner booth, same one every time, near the window where the sun broke through just enough to make the chipped linoleum glow. I'm Raymond Booth, Ray to most, and I guess I'd become a fixture in that booth since my knees gave up and the doctors said, enjoy your retirement. A couple decades in uniform will do that to a man. But this ain't about me. It's about Addie. She couldn't have been more than 30. Always wore long sleeves, even in July when the rest of us were sweating through our shirts. Never wore makeup. Didn't gossip with the other waitresses. Moved with this quiet precision, like someone who didn't waste energy on anything she didn't have to. But she saw everything. Not in a nosy way. More like an awareness. Like she scanned each room the second she stepped in. Watched the exits. Watched people's hands. Watched shadows. I recognized that. Not from her eyes, but from what they didn't do. They didn't flinch. It was a Monday when things shifted. A slow day. I was nursing my coffee, thinking about whether I could bring myself to tackle the pile of laundry at home. Addie came over, her sleeves pulled down as always, her notepad tucked under her arm. More coffee, Mr. Booth? I nodded. You know, you can call me Ray. I think I've earned that after drinking about a gallon of your diner brew every week. She gave a faint smile. All right, Ray. She poured, just enough to warm it up without watering it down. She had this way of doing even the simplest things like they mattered. Like pouring a cup of coffee was an act of care. She turned to walk off, but as she did, her sleeve caught on the edge of the syrup caddy. It slipped up her forearm before she could stop it. That's when I saw it. A tattoo, just above the wrist. Black ink, faded a little. It was a mark I hadn't seen in over a decade, but I'd never forget it. A hawk, wings spread over a coiled rope, with a Roman numeral, 13. I stared. She yanked her sleeve down fast, but not before the recognition hit me like a damn freight train. Where'd you get that? I asked, my voice low. She froze mid-step. Didn't turn around. For a second, I thought maybe she was going to pretend she didn't hear me. But then she slowly turned and looked me dead in the eye. I'm sorry, she said quietly. I've got to check on table 4. She vanished behind the counter. I sat there, heart thudding. That tattoo, it belonged to the 13th Reconnaissance Battalion. My nephew served in that unit. Lucas Booth. Deployed to Kandahar in 2011. They said the whole squad went MIA. No remains. No trace. Nothing. I carried that loss like a brick in my chest every damn day since. And now, this quiet waitress in a town no one visits, she had that mark on her skin? Couldn't be a coincidence. I waited. Watched her make the rounds. Refill a coffee for old Benny, who couldn't hear his own name half the time. Bring a grilled cheese to the Johnson kid, who came in every Monday after school. She didn't avoid me, but she didn't come back, either. After my second cup, I stood up slow, knees groaning, and walked to the counter. She was wiping it down with those methodical strokes of hers. I waited until she looked up. Addie, I said, keeping my voice low. That tattoo. My nephew had the same one. Lucas Booth. He served with the 13th, disappeared over there. I was told nobody made it out alive. Her hand froze over the counter. She didn't speak right away, just stared at the rag in her hand like it might save her from what was coming next. Then, barely a whisper, she said, Lucas saved my life. That was the moment the world stopped spinning for a second. I pulled out my wallet, still had that photo of Lucas I kept behind my license. Him in uniform, grinning like a kid, that same hawk tattoo visible under the rolled sleeve. Her eyes locked on it. She reached out slowly, as if touching it might make the memory hurt less. He used to hum that old Johnny Cash tune when we were pinned down, she said, voice shaking now. When we thought we weren't going to make it, he'd just hum, kept rhythm with his boots. Said it reminded him of fishing with his uncle. I stared at her. That was me, I said, throat thick. I took him fishing every summer till he left. Addie covered her mouth with one hand. Her eyes shimmered. The weight of what she'd been carrying settled over us like dust from a long-forgotten war. I don't know how long we stood there. Time didn't matter. The smell of bacon and coffee and old vinyl seats faded into the background. All that remained was a waitress with a mark on her arm and an old man with a nephew lost to the wind. We both thought we were the only ones left holding on to Lucas's memory. Turns out, we'd been carrying the same flame all along. I don't remember sitting back down, but I must have, because the next thing I knew, Addie was across from me in the booth, hands wrapped tight around a chipped mug like it was holding her together. Neither of us spoke right away. That's the thing about real grief. It doesn't show up loud. It settles in your bones like an old injury, flaring up when you least expect it. And now it was sitting right between us, in the shape of a ghost we both knew. Why didn't you say anything before? I finally asked. She looked up, and her voice was almost too quiet to hear. Because I wasn't ready to carry anyone else's sorrow. That hit harder than it should have. I came here to disappear, she added. After everything that happened over there, I didn't want to be a story. I didn't want to explain why I survived when 8 others didn't. Especially Lucas. Her eyes flicked to the photo I'd left on the table. We were pinned in a ravine just south of the Helmand River. A routine recon, they said, but the whole valley lit up on us. Lucas kept us moving, even after he got hit. She swallowed hard, hands trembling. He refused the medevac slot, she said. There were only 2. I took one. A kid named Vasquez took the other. Lucas stayed behind with Sergeant McCready and one of the new guys. Said he'd hold the line. I could barely breathe. They told us there were no survivors, I said. That everyone in that unit was presumed dead. I got a letter. A damn form letter, like Lucas was a billing error they had to correct. Addie nodded. That's what they told me, too. I spent a month in a field hospital near Ramstein. By the time I was stable, Command had already scrubbed the op, rewritten the records. I was told my unit had suffered an accidental explosion during training exercises. That I'd been reassigned. They gave me a medal I didn't want and a cover story I couldn't live with. She leaned back, exhausted. Not physically, spiritually. They erased us, she said. Every name. Every memory. Like we never existed. I sat in silence, trying to wrap my head around the fact that the government had buried not just bodies, but the truth. You know, I said after a long pause. Lucas always hated being photographed. Said pictures made things too real. But he gave me that one when he left. Said, keep it with you, UNC. Just in case you forget how good I look in camo. Addie smiled at that. A real smile, small but honest. He was like that, she said. Always making jokes. Even when the world was falling apart. The bell over the diner door jingled, and a few regulars wandered in. Morning crowd, mostly old-timers like me. Charlie, the owner, waved at me from behind the grill, raising an eyebrow like he knew something had shifted. I gave a small nod. Not now, I was telling him. Not yet. Addie stood, brushing her hands off on her apron. I should get back to work. You don't have to, I said. Take a minute. She shook her head gently. I need the motion, Ray. Stillness, it makes things too loud. I understood that more than I wanted to admit. As she turned to leave, I stopped her with a hand on her arm, not tight, just enough to make her pause. I'm glad you made it out, I said. She looked at me with something I couldn't quite name. Some days I am too, she said. Other days, I'm still deciding. And just like that, she disappeared into the hum of the diner, refilling coffee cups and clearing plates like she hadn't just cracked open a piece of her soul. I sat there a long while, staring at Lucas's photo. Addie Reed wasn't just a waitress. She was a living archive. And I had a feeling this town, this quiet, out-of-the-way diner, was about to become more than just a place where lonely vets sipped bitter coffee. It was about to become holy ground. By the next morning, something had changed. I couldn't tell you exactly what. The diner still smelled like bacon grease and burnt toast. The same vinyl booths squeaked under the same tired old-timers. But there was a current in the air, like the hum before a thunderstorm. Addie moved a little slower that day. Not from fatigue. From something deeper. Like she'd finally let go of a secret she'd held too long, and now her hands didn't know what to do. I watched her from my booth, the way she glanced over her shoulder a little more often. The way her eyes lingered on the American flag pinned to the corner wall like it meant something more than just decoration. She poured coffee for Big Jim and Merle like she always did, smiled politely when old Mr. Vaughn made another of his cringeworthy jokes about a pretty gal working so hard. But her smile didn't reach her eyes, and when she reached for Jim's mug, her sleeve slipped again. This time, the tattoo was fully visible. The hawk, the rope, 13, and Jim, who'd done 2 tours in Nam and still wore his VFW hat like it was armor, froze mid-laugh. You were with the 13th? He asked, his voice gone hoarse. Addie didn't answer. She just pulled her sleeve down and started to turn away. But Jim leaned forward, eyes locked on hers. My brother was in the 13th, he said quietly. He never came back. We never even got a body. Addie stopped. She stood there a second, unmoving. Then she turned around slowly and met his gaze. I'm sorry, she said, and it wasn't just polite. It was deep, real, like she was apologizing for the weight of the world. Then she added, almost a whisper, I might have known him. The whole diner went silent after that. Just for a moment. Even the old wall clock seemed to tick quieter. Charlie, watching from behind the counter, set down his spatula and walked over. He was a good man, Charlie. Korean War vet, though he never talked about it much. He owned the place, but didn't act like it. Always said the diner didn't belong to him. It belonged to the people who needed it. He stepped beside Addie and spoke softly. Go on. Take a break. She opened her mouth to protest. Charlie shook his head. You've earned one. So she walked outside, into the cool morning air. I gave it a minute, then followed. She was sitting on the back step, just behind the dumpster where the alley faced the woods. Her arms rested on her knees, her face tilted toward the sky. I didn't want to be found, she said, before I even sat down. I eased onto the concrete beside her. You weren't. Not really. You were remembered. She let out a breath, slow and ragged. After everything went sideways over there, I thought maybe I could build a life where no one knew me, where I could just breathe without being Sergeant Reed. Is that who you were? She gave a dry chuckle. Still am. Technically. Only no one's supposed to know it. According to the paperwork, Sergeant Addison Reed died in an ambush in the Darani foothills. You're talking to a man who's read his nephew's death certificate 3 times, I said. So forgive me if I question their accuracy. She looked at me. Her eyes were tired, but not empty. You want to know what really happened? She asked. I nodded. And she told me. Told me about Operation Thornlock. A black recon assignment deep in territory even the locals wouldn't chart. Their team had orders to track down stolen U.S. weapons that had gone missing in a transfer gone bad. Only they weren't just stolen, they were being used. By people who shouldn't have even known how to fire them. They set a trap, she said. We walked into it. She described 6 days of hell. Radio silence. No air support. Pinned under sniper fire on a ridgeline with nothing but smoke and sheer luck keeping them alive. Lucas had been the one keeping everyone steady. Every time I started to break, she said, voice trembling. He'd crack a joke about his uncle teaching him to bait a hook or fix a leaky faucet. He made the world feel smaller. Manageable. Like there was still something human out there. My throat went tight. She glanced down at her hands. When they came for us, we knew it was the end. He shoved me into a crevice, told me to stay down. I watched him take 2 rounds and still drag McCready behind cover. He got Mac to safety. Then he didn't come back. Her voice cracked. I waited until nightfall, crawled out, and made my way east. It took 2 days. When I finally reached an extraction point, I passed out before I could speak. They had no idea who I was. My dog tags were gone. My face was burned. I guess they assumed I was one of the bodies they couldn't identify. I sat there in silence, letting it sink in. She stared into the woods, and for a moment, we were both back there, on that ridge, with fire all around. I'm sorry, she whispered. For what? I asked. For surviving, she said. I put a hand on her shoulder. He'd be proud you did. We sat like that for a while. 2 souls stitched together by a war that no one would ever read about in a book. And in the quiet of that alley behind the diner, I realized something. You don't have to wear a uniform to serve. Sometimes service means carrying the weight no one sees. And Addie Reed carried more than anyone should. That next Sunday morning, the regulars gathered at Charlie's like always, but something was different. Conversations were softer. Heads turned when Addie walked through the door, not with suspicion anymore, but with something closer to reverence. She wasn't hiding her ink today. For the first time since she arrived in Cedar Hollow, her sleeves were rolled up. Her tattoos, what little you could see, told stories only some of us could read. Not just that hawk with the rope, but smaller ones too. Blood type on the wrist. Coordinates on the inside of her arm. A small, faded tally near her elbow. 8 marks. One for each of the fallen. She moved through the diner with that same calm grace. But now, folks didn't just glance her way. They watched with quiet respect. The same kind of silence we used to give the chaplain before a funeral detail. By the time I got to my seat, Charlie was already pouring me a coffee. "She tell you?" he asked without looking up. "Yeah," I said. "She told me." Charlie nodded. "About time someone did." Addie stopped at my booth. "You hungry?" I shook my head. "Not for food." She sat down, apron still on. Her hands fidgeted for a second before she looked me in the eye. "I haven't spoken their names in years," she said. Not even out loud. It felt like betrayal. Like saying them would make it real that they were gone. I reached into my coat pocket and slid a small notebook across the table. "What's this?" "Write them down," I said. "Their names. Every one of them." She stared at it. "Names matter," I told her. "Even if no one else remembers them, you do. And now I will too." She opened the notebook, hands shaking, and began to write. Private First Class Ezra Vasquez. Sergeant Marcus Mac McCready. Specialist Lana Cho. Corporal Terry Wynn. Private Daniel Fitch. Staff Sergeant Lena O'Connor. Specialist Robert Lane. And finally, Corporal Lucas Booth. 8 names. Written slowly, carefully, like she was chiseling them in stone. When she finished, she slid the notebook back. "You keep it." I shook my head. "No, you're not passing this burden to me. You're sharing it." She didn't argue. Didn't need to. We sat like that for a while. The chatter of the diner muffled behind the weight of remembrance. Then Charlie's voice called out from behind the counter. "Ray, you want to make yourself useful?" "What's that?" He pointed to the wall behind the register. "There's a spot right there. Been bare for years. Tell me fix that." He slid a photo across the counter. An old black and white snapshot I hadn't seen in a decade. Lucas, grinning in the desert. One arm around McCready, the other tossing a peace sign at the camera. Someone, maybe Addie, had cleaned it up and printed it. Charlie placed a frame beside it. "We put it up today," he said. "No speeches, just quiet memory." Addie stepped forward, eyes wide. "You sure?" she asked. Charlie nodded. "Every town has its ghosts. We might as well honor ours." We gathered around the wall. Small crowd. Just a dozen or so folks who'd watched Addie for years and never asked who she used to be. And now, without fanfare, they knew. She hung the frame. Her hands didn't tremble this time. The photo caught the morning light just right. And under it, etched into the plaque, were the words. "In memory of the 13th Recon. Those who walked quietly so others could sleep peacefully." That was the first time I saw tears in her eyes that didn't come from guilt. When she turned around, Charlie handed her a new apron. Freshly stitched, just above the heart, the hawk and the rope. Her mark. Her story. Hers to wear, or not. But now, it didn't need hiding. The rest of the day passed slow, like time knew it needed to stretch and settle. Customers came and went, some pausing by the photo. Some leaving bills folded under coffee cups with small notes scribbled in pen. "Thank you for your service. We see you. A hero walks among us." That night, as the last table cleared and the neon sign buzzed low, I watched Addie rest her hand on the photo. Not in grief. In peace. "Tomorrow's gonna feel different," she said. "Yeah," I replied. "But you'll still be here. Same booth. Same coffee. Just a little more seen." And in that quiet corner of Oregon, beneath the hum of old lights and old pain, something healed. We weren't just a town anymore. We were a memory keeper's circle. By Thursday, word had made its way through every barber shop, post office, and bait shop from here to Tiller Ridge. The waitress at Charlie's, the quiet one with the long sleeves, she used to be someone. Not used to be, like washed up or broken. Used to be like honored. People started saying her name differently. Like it meant something. Because it did. Addie didn't change her routine. She still arrived before sunrise. Still wiped every table down twice. Still took her coffee black and silent before the first customers came in. But the way people looked at her, that changed. Folks who never said 2 words now tipped extra. Teenagers stopped whispering when she walked by. Even Glenn, the UPS guy who always flirted like a bad country song, toned it down. It wasn't pity. It was respect. But something else happened, too. Something I didn't expect. Veterans started showing up. Not in groups. Not loudly. Just one or two at a time. Guys with patches on their jackets and eyes that had seen too much. Women with close-cropped hair and boots that still knew formation. They came in, sat at the counter, and didn't ask for menus. They asked for Addie. She didn't say much to them. Just nodded. Poured their coffee. Sometimes she'd give a tiny half-smile, like she saw something in them most people missed. And that was enough. By the next week, we'd turned Tuesdays into something new. Coffee Circle. It wasn't official. Charlie never put up a sign or handed out flyers. But at 7 a.m. every Tuesday, veterans started filing in. Some in uniform, some in flannel, some in silence. Addie didn't lead the group. She wasn't the type to stand in front of a room and preach. But she anchored it. She'd refill mugs, sit at the edge of the booth, share a memory here, a name there. Sometimes she'd just sit and listen. One morning, she told us about Cho. Specialist Lana Cho, a practical joker with a foul mouth and a laugh that sounded like gravel on vinyl. She once stole our lieutenant's socks, boiled them in ramen, and dared Vasquez to eat it, Addie said, shaking her head. He did, out of pure peer pressure and 2 bad beers. We laughed, not out of disrespect, but because we knew. In those moments, that laughter was holy. Another Tuesday, she told us about McCready, a bulldozer of a man who once sang Ave Maria to calm down a frightened Afghan kid during a night raid. She described how he wrote letters for the younger soldiers, always on hotel stationery he stole from a base visit in Kuwait. He called it combat correspondence, Addie said. Said it made him feel like Hemingway, but with worse handwriting. We laughed again, and when the stories ended, we sat quiet. Let the silence breathe. Because silence, when shared among the wounded, isn't empty. It's sacred. And Addie made it sacred. That same week, something unexpected happened. A young man named Caleb showed up. College kid. Clean haircut, pressed shirt, shoes too nice for the gravel lot. He sat in the back, sipping water, listening. Didn't say a word. At the end, he stood up. I used to think serving meant picking up a weapon, he said. That if you didn't fight, you didn't count. But hearing you all, I realized maybe service is surviving. Carrying each other. Remembering. He looked at Addie. You made me want to be better. So I'm enlisting. Addie looked stunned. Like no one had ever told her she inspired something before. You sure? She asked. Caleb nodded. Not for glory. Just for purpose. That night, after everyone left, Addie sat across from me again. Just like she had the first time this started. You think I did the right thing? She asked. I shrugged. You didn't do anything. She tilted her head. You just showed up, I said. You stayed alive. You carried their names. You never stopped serving. And in doing that, you gave someone else a reason to start. She didn't say anything for a long time. Then finally, you ever feel like you're being pulled back into a war you thought you left behind? Every day, I said. But this one's quieter. And maybe more important. She nodded slowly. Outside, the rain had started. Inside, Addie Reed, sergeant, survivor, waitress, warrior, wiped the counter clean with the same careful rhythm she always used. Only now, every gesture said, I remember. I am still here. And you're not alone. The photo on the wall behind the counter changed everything. People paused by it like it was sacred. The names etched below it, 8 in total, weren't just names anymore. They became part of the town. Part of us. Addie never made a speech, never asked for recognition. But one morning, she walked in and found something sitting under that photo. A small wooden box. Inside, a folded American flag, a purple heart, and a bronze star. They belonged to Lucas. I'd kept them tucked away for over a decade, unsure what to do with them. But that morning, I knew. Addie froze when she opened it. I can't take these. They're not mine to keep either, I told her. They belong to both of us now. You carry the memories. I carry the blood. She didn't say anything. Just set the box under the counter like it belonged there. The next Tuesday, Coffee Circle was full. Chairs pulled from the kitchen. A few people standing. That day, Addie told us about Robert Lane. He was the youngest, she said, smiling faintly. Still had braces when he deployed. Used to write letters to his dog back home. Said she was the only one who listened. Everyone laughed. But I caught the shake in her hands when she took a sip from her cup. Later, after the crowd thinned, Addie sat down next to me. I thought if I remembered them long enough, I could keep them alive, she said. You did, I told her. And now we all do. Sometimes healing doesn't come like thunder. Sometimes it's a photograph, a plaque, a quiet diner where names are spoken aloud and no one looks away. Jake used to be the loudmouth, teenager with a chip on his shoulder and too many opinions about things he didn't understand. I remember him calling Addie Combat Barbie once behind her back. Thought it was clever. But things change. Over weeks of coffee circle, Jake kept showing up. Quiet at first, then asking questions, then listening, for real. One morning, he approached Addie after most folks had left. Nervous as a wet dog. I enlisted, he said. National Guard. Addie didn't say anything at first. Just looked at him the way a big sister might. Stern, but not unkind. You sure this isn't just guilt? She asked. He shook his head. It's purpose. I was lost. You helped me see that strength doesn't look how I thought it did. She nodded, then handed him a worn patch from her old uniform. Then carry this. Not as a trophy, as a reminder. Jake took it like it was gold. That day, Addie told the group about Corporal Wynn. Wynn had a baby on the way when we deployed, she said. He used to read parenting books in his bunk. Said he wanted to be ready. Her voice cracked a little. He never got to meet her. Jake leaned in, listening like he needed every word. When she finished, he whispered, I won't forget his name. And that's all she needed to hear. The loudmouth kid was gone. In his place stood a young man learning what it meant to serve, because someone showed him how. 6 months passed. Rose-colored mornings turned into leaf-blown afternoons. The diner, once just a stop for eggs and coffee, had become something else, a chapel of sorts. Veterans came from other counties now. Word had spread, not about Addie specifically, but about the feeling inside that diner. Respect, silence, memory. Addie still worked every morning. Still wore her boots like armor. But now her tattoos weren't questioned. They were honored. Folks asked about them. And she answered. Sometimes. One morning, a woman named Carla, Army medic, 2 tours, walked in with a box. I heard what you're building here, she said to Addie. It matters. Inside the box were letters. Dozens of them. From soldiers. To home. Some never mailed. I collected them, Carla said. Didn't know what to do with them. Until now. Addie handled the box like it held glass. That evening, she added a small shelf under the photo wall. Placed the box there. Wrote one word on a label, Echoes. Now, anyone who walked in could read a letter. Sit with someone's last thoughts. Remember that these weren't just names. They were lives paused mid-sentence. After she closed up that night, Addie sat beside me. I'm still not sure I'm whole, she admitted. None of us are, I said. But you're healing others just by standing here. She smiled at that. And for the first time, it didn't look heavy. Fall settled into Cedar Hollow with crisp mornings and fire-orange leaves. The kind of quiet that carries memory well. Charlie's Diner now had more than a photo wall. There were medals pinned in shadow boxes, folded flags in corners, and that Echoes box that kept growing. People came just to sit with the names. One Friday morning, a woman I'd never seen before came in. Mid-40s. Neat clothes. Nervous hands. She asked for Addie. When Addie came out, the woman stood slowly. I'm Eliza Wynn, Terry's sister. Addie froze. They hugged. Not like old friends, but like 2 people standing in the same storm. Eliza didn't want answers. She just wanted stories. He used to whistle old country songs, Addie said later. Even when we were being shelled. Drove us nuts, but it made us feel like we weren't going to die. Eliza cried. Not out of grief. Out of gratitude. You're the only reason I know he mattered, she whispered. After she left, Addie turned to me. I never thought I'd meet the families. That I'd get to give something instead of just carry it. I nodded. You've been giving all along. You just didn't know. That night, a new plaque went up on the wall. In memory of those we've lost. And in thanks to those who remember. No ribbon cutting. No speeches. Just silence. And stories. Winter came early that year. Cold wind through pine trees. A gray sky hanging low over Cedar Hollow. But the diner stayed warm. Coffee brewing. Boots stomping off snow. And stories passed around like old photos. Addie still worked the morning shift, but something had changed. She didn't just belong here. She was here. Every inch of that place now held pieces of the 13th Echo, names in the frame, stories on the lips of old vets, and the silent gratitude of folks who'd never worn a uniform but understood sacrifice now, even just a little. Jake, now Private First Class Jake Moran, sat in the back on leave, sharing photos from basic training. Charlie had a reserved sign on Addie's favorite booth every Tuesday, not because she needed it, but because the town needed her there. One night, I asked her, "You ever wish you'd stayed gone?" She thought for a moment, then shook her head. No, they deserved to be remembered, and I think I needed to remember myself too. I slid a fresh photo across the table. A group shot from that week's coffee circle. Addie, me, Jake, Carla, Charlie, and a dozen others. "You're in this one," I said. She smiled. About time. Outside, snow had started falling, soft and slow. Inside, Addie stood and walked to the counter. She poured one last cup of coffee and set it down under the photo of Lucas and the others. A quiet gesture, almost like prayer. Then she turned back to us. "We carry the weight so others don't have to," she said. "Not because we're heroes, but because someone has to remember." And we all did. In that little diner where heroes once walked, and still do, we kept the flame burning, one cup at a time.